able to stand before you today and just to be able to preach the Word of God. As we were worshiping and singing, a lot of the times in life we find ourselves at this place where we may be walking through something and there's nothing like the assurance and peace sometimes that come from just entering into the presence of God. And I don't know where you're at this morning, but that last song, He's calling. He's calling each and every one of us. And even if you know His voice, we all have that tendency, one day we wake up, it's just an off day, and we get the day moving quicker than usual by whatever means or need arises, and we find ourselves just kind of going through the motions of the day, but in the midst of it, He's just there, He's waiting, He's calling us. And, no matter what you're walking through, I just want you to know that there's peace that can be found only in Him, by Him. And, as He's calling, that verse says, come to the altar. And a lot of the times, it's not necessarily a physical altar, that a stage or a platform that the sacrifice was laid upon, but we can create an altar within our hearts. And sometimes, no matter where you're at, you can be in the most public of places, but just creating an altar within your heart and taking whatever that may be that's troubling you and just placing it upon that altar and giving it to God as a sacrifice of saying that, God, this is something bigger than I, but there's nothing bigger than you, nothing bigger than what you can handle in this moment. And just that willingness to lay it down before Him at His feet in the knowledge, the faith, the hope of knowing that in His hands the impossible can be done. The natural becomes the supernatural, and we see things that become miraculous performed right before our eyes. And so this morning, no matter what you're holding on to, no matter what is opposing you, no matter what you're walking through, I encourage you, whether it's a physical altar at a place in your home that you find as a place of refuge, maybe it's your prayer closet, maybe it's the corner of your bed where you kneel down every morning and pray, but I encourage you, take whatever that is that you're carrying and lay it on that place and give it to God this morning. And just know that He's faithful to take care of it and take care of you. And that there's nothing that befalls you that will overcome you by His name. So I just encourage you this morning, wherever you're at, whatever you're dealing with, lay that on the altar. And I believe, nothing in this life is coincidence. And the fact that, just these songs that we were singing this morning for worship, the message that I'm going to be preaching today, the platform that is the world's stage, and we're watching these things transpire upon the earth, and we see this hint of peace taking place in the Middle East, and then it's just already violated, and now it's going back against that, and we're seeing just the reemergence of the conflicts that's taking place in those areas. We're seeing protests taking place all over our country, and that's just on the bigger scale of things, but in the microcosms of the individualities of our lives, there's things that are taking place as well, because the enemy is not just doing an all-out onslaught and campaign against all of the world as a whole, but he's even attacking the individual aspects of our lives and trying to get you to waver or doubt in who God is and what His Word says that you have access to. And we find a lot of this world is finding themselves in a place of despair. And the definition of despair is to lose all hope, to be overcome by a sense of futility or defeat, to be hopeless, to have no hope, to give up all hope or expectation. And we've preached in the last couple of weeks messages about hope, even in the midst of hopeless situations. And this morning, I just want to kind of reiterate on that, because I feel like it's a necessity for us to really grab hold of and to anchor ourselves to, which is our hope and our assurance that's found in Jesus Christ. And what better way to look at these situations that are taking place in the earth or even in our personal lives than by looking at stories where Jesus came into otherwise hopeless and despair situations, and we saw him move into that situation because of desperation. And sometimes, we just spoke, I gave you the definition of despair, it's to lose all hope, but sometimes we have to find ourselves getting to the place that all the things that we have placed our hope in all of our lives, maybe it's within ourselves, maybe it's within our government, maybe it's within our job, maybe it's within our friends or our family, our loved ones, whatever it may be, maybe it's within a doctor and his diagnosis for our life. We put our hope in these things, understanding maybe that, they have more education, more knowledge, more understanding, more ability to be able to provide comfort and peace and security in those moments. But sometimes God has to bring us to a place of all-out despair, hopelessness in those things, so that we can find ourselves in a place of desperation for him, the only one who can cease all conflicts in any place, whether it's within our minds, within our hearts, within our spirits, whether it's within our natural environment around us. God is the only one who can bring peace to that situation. We need to find ourselves desperate for God. In a world where despair is wrought and it's running rampant, you find people just hopeless and thinking that things will never get better. But the ones who follow the voice of the Lord, ones who have come to know him intimately, know and have come from this place of desperation for God and finding that that's where they find their hope, because they've seen God answer in their most desperate cries and pleas in those moments. That's whenever his Spirit comes into that situation and turns everything around. But it's only once they relinquish all hope into other things and place it solely in the only one who can do something in that situation. And so today I want to go through a couple of stories within the Bible just as confirmation and reiteration of not only what Jesus' heart is, because he brings hope to the hopeless. He brings peace to those that are in chaos. He brings healing to those that are sick. He brings redemption to those that are lost and in utter despair. All throughout the Psalms we hear David speak about his soul longs for God. And with his whole being, he thirsts for God's presence. And consistently, he cried out for God to save him in various hopeless seeming situations. So let me ask you this morning, are you desperate for God? Are you at a place where nothing else in this world will do, nothing else will satisfy or bring peace or solace into a certain circumstance or situation, to where your only resort is to cry out to God because he is the only one who can do something in that situation? Because that's the best place to be in. When we finally come to the end of ourselves, we finally come to the end of our hope in this world, but we put it in the Creator of this world. The one who formed and fashioned your most inward parts. The one who framed this entire reality just by his words alone is the only one who can come into whatever situation, no matter how big or how small. And trust me, God loves the small things. It's even in the smallest details that he finds pleasure in weaving his creativity, his passion for us within it. So let me ask you this morning, are you desperate for God? We have a saying back home in our church that we came from, and I heard it all throughout ministry school, that when your desperation factor exceeds your embarrassment factor, you are a prime candidate for a move of God. You are a prime candidate for a miracle. It's when you get to this place where you no longer care what anyone else thinks. You no longer care about what the circumstances look like, no matter how great the cost. But your willingness to pursue God, even in the most embarrassing or the most culturally uncomfortable situations, that you find God be drawn to that moment because of your desperation. That's when we see God do the miraculous. That's when we see him come into that situation and do the supernatural. So we're going to start off with a familiar story to probably a lot of us in Luke 18. I'm going to be preaching about blind Bartimaeus this morning. Old blind Bartimaeus. I can get there. There we go. Then it happened. Let's just start there. Then it happened. Let me express something to you. When Jesus is on the move, when Jesus is coming through your area, then it happens. It's in that moment when his presence enters that space that we see things happen. And it was in this moment there was a stirring going on. Something that normally was unconventional. We see a movement taking place. We see a place that's normally docile and quiet. All of a sudden a stir with a bunch of movement, a bunch of noise, a bunch of talking and expectation. Then it happened, as he was coming near Jericho, that a certain blind man sat by the road begging. Bart had been blind all of his life. He had come to be able to perceive this world around him through the sounds, the smells, the other senses that he had. And in this moment, he had spent his entire life dependent upon the needs of other people. The generosity and the kindness of those who were passing by and took pity upon him. And hearing the multitude passing by, he asked what it meant. Sometimes when you start to sense something shifting in your environment, when the presence of God is on the move, that's when we need to inquire, what's going on? Something feels different in the spirit. And in that moment, we see blind Bartimaeus. He sensed something greater was about to take place. He felt a move of God moving into his proximity, into his parameters. And it was in this moment that he inquired about it. So they told him that Jesus of Nazareth was passing by. And the moment that he heard, I'm sure he had heard the name of Jesus. He had heard some of the tell of miracles that were taking place, that lame were beginning to walk, that blind were beginning to see, that thousands were being fed with very minimal amounts of provision. And it's in this moment that all of a sudden, this despair that had been in his life, all the eternity of his life, all these years that he had been sitting by, just listening, waiting for a moment where something could shift in his life, all of a sudden he hears that Jesus is on the move into his area. And so what does he do? Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me. We see him cry out in desperation. We see him raise his voice. We see that moment. We see pure desperation coming out of him. And it's when we find ourselves at that place where all our lives we've had this pent up just building of this despair and feeling like nothing was ever going to change. In that moment, he knew that there was nothing else he could do but raise his voice and cry out. And in doing so, we saw Jesus inquire. Then those who were before him, they warned him that he should be quiet. I'm going to let you know right now, when you find yourself in that place of desperation and you no longer care about what anyone else thinks, all you care about is what your need is. And in that moment, it's a touch of God. In that moment, you cry out all the more, and that's exactly what Bart did. Even though they were saying, hey, keep it down, man. You're disturbing everything. He did it once again. Jesus! Son of David, have mercy on me! It's when we find ourselves at that place where we're willing to cry out despite what others are thinking, what others are looking at you in that moment of circumstance, and they're saying, gosh, this guy's being a little unreasonable. He's making a commotion. Sometimes we need to make a commotion. We need to allow God to see the desperation, that building up of despair that was in our life finally coming out, because it's a desperation for him to move in that situation. We see that all his life had been hopeless, that nothing would ever change. And in this moment, this was his last chance. This was the last opportunity. He knew something had to happen. So he cried out. And so they warned him, hey, don't do this. And he cried out again. And so Jesus stood and commanded him to be brought to him. It's in that moment when you're crying out, you catch his attention.
whether he's sitting on the throne at the right hand of the Father, making intercessions for us, when he sees that level of desperation within you, he's drawn to it. God not only inhabits the praises of his people, but he also hears the cry of those that are in need. And it's in that moment, just as he had compassion on the 5,000, seeing them looking like a sheep without a shepherd, it's in this moment that we see a lost sheep, a hurt sheep, that the shepherd hears the baying and the crying out, the need that's coming from this lost sheep. And he's drawn to it. That caring nature of his, that compassion comes forth. And so he tells him, bring him towards me. And he asks him, he says, what do you want me to do for you? And he said, Lord, that I may receive my sight. And then Jesus said, receive your sight, for your faith has made you well. I want you to know today that whenever you find yourself in that place of crying out to Jesus, and you're in just utter despair, you need something to shift in your life. It's in that moment where you cry out with everything that you have within you, and he responds to you. It's in that moment, not only just your cry of desperation that's going to see that healing take place in your life, but it's the belief within the one that is drawn near to you in that moment and has asked you, what is it that you have need of? Because when we find ourselves crying out in desperation, he will show up. But you have to believe that he is capable in that moment of doing the impossible in that situation. And immediately, once again, then it happened. Immediately. It's these miraculous, instantaneous moments where God's presence comes in just an overwhelming, supernatural way. And immediately he received his sight. And then he followed him. I want to tell you today, when you cry out in desperation and God shows up and you see him heal whatever that need is in your life, the expectation is for you to follow him. But not just to follow him, because we see after following him, he glorified God everywhere that he went. And all the people, when they saw it, gave praise to God. Our miracles are not just meant for us, but they're meant for the glory of God. They're meant to show other people, just as we were talking about on Thursday night. Once again, it's that testimony, which means do it again. It's not only saying that God has done this in my life, but you're prophesying it to the life of those that are hearing it, that have maybe seen the difference that has taken place in your life, the transformation that has resulted from this. And all of a sudden, their faith is risen. All of a sudden, they begin to recognize Jesus as the miracle worker in that situation. And so they gave praise to God. Your miracle isn't just for you, but it's for everyone that you encounter. It's for you to be able to go out and share with other people. The next person I'm going to talk about is out of Mark 2. And once again, we find someone that's in need. And I just want to encourage you this morning, if you find yourself and you're in that place where you have need, allow your desperation to rise. Not despair and hopelessness, but rather this building up of the only thing that can change this situation is the presence of Jesus Christ. Cry out to him today. All right, Mark 2, verses 1 through 12. And again, stop there, and again. I want you to know that no matter if he's done it before, he will do it again, okay? And again, he entered Capernaum. After some days, it was heard that he was in the house. Man, I would love to hear that Jesus is in the house right now. I feel his presence. Where two or more are gathered in his name, he's in our midst, so I'm confident he's here right now. And once again, we see immediately many gathered together. And so there was no longer any room to receive them, not even near the door. And as he preached the word to them, then they came to him, bringing a paralytic man who was carried by 4 men. Let's stop there for a moment. We see once again that there is someone who has been paralyzed from birth. We see this person who's lived his life pretty much in utter despair of saying, hey, it's never going to get any better. I'm never going to be able to walk again. I've maybe gone and seen a bunch of doctors, and every time I go, their report is the same. I'm sorry, but you're just going to be paralyzed. This is your life now. And I'm sure he's come to this place where he's like, this is the hand that I've been dealt, so I'm just going to play it. But then all of a sudden, he hears tell that Jesus is on the move again. He's come to Capernaum. And in this moment, they're gathering at a house. And he's surrounded by his friends who, let me ask you this. What are your friends like? Are they those that sit there and kind of just throw pity parties with you? Or are they ones that encourage you in your faith and say, hey, no, it's not over yet? I've heard tell that God can change any and everything. And they continue to encourage him so much that they're like, you know what? Let's take you to him. I heard that Jesus is in town. Let's go. And so these four men, what good friends, to be able to lift this man up and carry him over into this presence, into this gathering. And it's in this moment. Don't worry about the interruptions, because I'm telling you, they come. But it's in this moment that they carry this man over to the house and they see, oh no, there's a wall of people. How are we ever going to get through carrying this man? I'm sure if he's just your average weight, you're looking at 135, 140 pounds, and you've got just a sea of people condensed into this home, just waiting, expectant to see God, Jesus Christ himself, do something miraculous. And in this moment, I'm sure they felt just kind of this place of like, oh man, what are we going to do? But then yet that desperation, that need, the knowing that, hey, the only thing that's going to change my circumstance in this moment is getting before Jesus Christ himself and being able to get a touch from the healer himself. So what does his friends do? They're like, nah, we're going to find a way. And what do? They go to the upper place. They climb up onto the roof of this house, and then they begin to tear in through the tiles. They begin to rip apart the beams to be able to lower this man right down into the presence, into the lap of Jesus Christ himself. Are your friends willing to do that for you today? Are they willing to pick you up whenever you're lame and you feel like you just can't get up and move anymore? Are they willing to bring you into the presence of God Almighty in that moment? Whether it be through prayer or the physical act of carrying you into that circumstance. But yet, here we see them lowering him down into the lap of Jesus. And when Jesus saw their faith, once again we see not only was there a level of desperation, but it was accompanied by unwavering faith. It was like, we're so desperate that we're going to lower him into that room. And you know what? My faith is that when Jesus sees it, he's going to do it. He can. Not only can he, but he will. We need to have that kind of faith when it comes to God, that not only can he do it, but he will in that moment. When we move ourselves in this desperate of a means to say, God, I'm not going to stop until you heal me, until you bless me in this moment, until you take this seemingly horrible circumstance and you turn it around for my good. And so when Jesus saw their faith, he said to the paralytic, son, your sins are forgiven. And some of the scribes were sitting there and they were reasoning in their hearts, why does this man speak blasphemies like this? Who can forgive sins but God alone? But immediately when Jesus perceived in his spirit, they reasoned thus within themselves. He said to them, why do you reason about these things in your hearts? Which is easier to say to the paralytic, your sins are forgiven? Or to you I say, arise and take up your bed and walk. But that you may know that the Son of Man has the power on earth to forgive sins. And then he said to the paralytic, I say to you again, arise, take up your bed, and go to your house. And immediately he arose and took up his bed, and he went into the presence of them all, so that they were all amazed and glorified God, saying, we've never seen anything like this. I want you all to have a testimony that others look at it and say, we've never seen anything like this. That they would only know that God Almighty himself was able to change this circumstance in your life. But it's going to come from a desperation to do things that seem like they're just going to go against the comfort of maybe your personality, or they're going to be maybe a disruption in the environment, but nonetheless your desperation factor must exceed your embarrassment factor. You must put aside the fear of man and allow your fear of God. And not a, I'm afraid of him, but rather a reverence of knowing that he's the only one that can do what I need done in my life right now. Is that going to be what's going to drive you, or are you going to allow the perception of others in that moment to lead you, to prevent you, to hold you back from receiving the healing that only God can provide in that moment? Are you going to allow your friends to encourage you, to lift you up? We saw that in that moment, a man who had been lame, paralyzed from birth, got up and walked. So much so that it was such a miraculous instance that not only were those in the house just in awe and began to glorify God, but we saw this shift in the perception of the scribes and the Pharisees in that moment of, there's something different about this guy. Maybe he is the Son of Man. Maybe he is the Son of God. And then last but not least, we're going to talk about one of the most powerful stories in the Bible, in my opinion. There's multiple facets to this situation that are taking place, and I just want it to be a testimony that no matter what the circumstances look like, God can heal. God can move. In Mark 5, verse 21, it says, "Now, when Jesus had crossed over again by boat to the other side, a great multitude gathered to him, and he was by the sea. And behold, one of the rulers of the synagogue came, Jairus by name. And when he saw him, he fell at his feet and begged him earnestly, saying, 'My little daughter lies at the point of death. Come and lay your hands on her, that she may be healed, and that she will live.'" We see this moment of desperation. A father has probably received several diagnoses from doctors in that area saying that your daughter doesn't look too good. She's at death's door. You might need to start making arrangements. You might need to start putting your house in order because I don't know if she's going to make it through this. And in this moment, he hears that Jesus is coming into town. And so what does he do? He runs to Jesus and he falls down on his knees before him and he says, "You gotta do something, Jesus, please. If you just place your hands on her, I know that she'll be healed." There's that desperation level. And so what does Jesus do? So Jesus went with him, and a great multitude began to follow and throng him. That means that this large crowd, this multitude of people are pressing in upon him. There's excitement stirring. People are like, oh, there's about to be a miracle that's going to take place. We're about to see someone raised from the dead. We're about to see this little girl come back to life again in this moment. And all these people are so anticipating of this moment that they begin to press in up against Jesus. I've got to see this for myself. I've heard about it, but now's the moment where I can actually see it in person, in live and in living color, right before my own eyes. I've got to see this miracle take place. And they begin to press in upon Jesus. And now a certain woman in that same crowd, just like with blind Bartimaeus, just like with this paralytic man, they had been in this place of despair, hopelessness. Now a certain woman had a flow of blood for 12 years and had suffered many things from many physicians. She had been dealing with this ailment for 12 years of her life. Most of us, we spend a week with a cold and we think it's all over. It's like, oh God, how am I going to get through this? But this woman suffered for 12 years. Doctors couldn't figure it out. I'm sure she had all of her financial ability to be able to seek out the best medical help, and then all it did was made it worse. And I want to encourage you, I know even in my own life that tendency to desire to go to the doctor because, hey, they went to school for like 12 years. So they probably know a thing or two. But I encourage you, before you ever even go to them, go see the great physician. Go see the great healer himself. Get down on your knees and say, Jesus, what is the diagnosis? I know that you can heal me. I know that you can touch me. And I'm not saying don't go to doctors, but I'm saying in those moments where you find yourself maybe receiving a bad prognosis, a bad diagnosis, saying, you know what? I'm desperate. And I'm desperate that I know that no matter what these situations, this diagnosis, this circumstance looks like, the only one who can heal me in this moment is Jesus. He's my creator. He's my healer. He's my provider. And so she had suffered many things from many physicians. I'm sure she tried all kinds of experimental treatments that left her just in more pain, maybe in more distress of like nothing seems to be working. Will I ever get over this? And as she's sitting on town, because you've got to understand, people that dealt with ailments and diseases like this during that time were social outcasts. They were not allowed to come into the parameters of the community because they didn't know what was going on and they didn't want to risk getting anybody else sick. So she was socially ostracized out to the outcast, the side of the road, and she's standing there, and all of a sudden she sees once again this great turmoil, this movement taking place, all of these people crossing through towns, surrounding this one man in eager expectation that something miraculous is about to happen. And her, being on the sidelines, finally found herself, hey, you know what? I'm going to see something miraculous take place too. I want to encourage you, even when you're seeing God move in other circumstances and other people's lives, it's in that moment that you say, hey, you know what? I'm going to get a piece of that myself. I'm going to jump in. If God is dishing out healing, I'm going to go get served some of that right now. And it said that she had spent all that she had and was no better, but rather grew worse. So she's just desperate. And when she heard about Jesus, she came behind him in the crowd and touched his garment. Now you got to understand, this crowd is pressing in. I don't know if you've ever been at a big concert or a large crowd of people, but when they start to move, it's like you have no choice but to move with them. But somehow this woman who is dealing with an issue of blood, which means she was most likely very sensitive. She probably had some form of anemia to where even the simplest bump would cause her to bleed profusely. She said, I'm going to risk it all, and I'm going to press myself through this throng of people to reach up and just touch him. You know what? Even if I can't get a touch from him, I'm going to touch him. It's in that moment of desperation that's saying, you know what? I haven't received that touch of God yet, so I'm going to give all that I have to reach out and grab a hold of him. And it's in this moment that we see her reach up and touch the hem of her garment, of his garment. I don't know what that looked like. She could have been down on her hands and her knees, reaching out, probably getting stepped on by other people, probably getting shoved over to the side. But yet she gave it all that she had, and she reached out as far as she could, and she grabbed a hold of the hem of that garment. And in that moment, she was healed. And when she heard about Jesus, she touched his garment. For she said, if I only touch his clothes, I shall be made well. And immediately the fountain of her blood was dried up. And she felt in her body, in that instant, that she was healed of all affliction. Isn't it amazing to see the fruit of your faith? In that moment, she knew in her innermost being that if I could just reach out and touch him, and she did, and what happened? She was healed instantly. She didn't need a word from him. She didn't need him to turn around and touch her, pray over her, lay hands on her. No. She had that desperation and that belief, that faith, that all it would take is me grabbing a hold of him. And I want to encourage you this morning, whatever you have to do, grab a hold of Jesus. No matter how stormy the seas become, no matter how much the throngs of people are pressing in against you, do not stop until you grab a hold of Jesus. And Jesus, immediately knowing in himself that power had gone out from him, turned around in the crowd and said, who touched my clothes? But his disciples said to him, you see the multitude thronging around you, and you say, who touched me? They're just in disbelief because they're like, how are we going to know who touched you? Everybody's touching you, Jesus. Yeah, but there's a difference here. There's someone with mighty faith that grabbed a hold of him in that moment. And that was the difference that Jesus felt. And that was the difference that he was speaking of in that moment. And he looked around and he saw her who had done this thing. But the woman, fearing and trembling, knowing what had happened to her, came and fell down before him and told him the whole truth. And he said to her, "Daughter, now stand up. You don't need to be worried." He said, "Your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your affliction." Jesus wants that kind of response out of us. He wants that desperation and that faith of knowing that if we could just grab a hold of him, that we could experience the true healing that we've always desired in our lives. And while he was still speaking, some came from the ruler of the synagogue's house who said, "Your daughter is dead." All of a sudden, we see this miraculous moment take place where this woman who would basically be living a life that was just in utter despair and almost leading towards death was healed. And then, boom, we see this shift all of a sudden. We see this just horrific news come onto the stage, and basically the messengers for this man, Jairus, came to Jesus and basically said to him and Jairus as they were making this journey to his house, "Don't bother him anymore. Your daughter's passed away. I'm sorry." "Your daughter is already dead. Why trouble the teacher any further?" And as soon as Jesus heard the word that was spoken, he said to the ruler of the synagogue, "Do not be afraid. Only believe." And today, this morning, right now, I want to tell you, no matter what someone else has told you, whether it's a death sentence, whether it's a bad diagnosis of an illness, whether it's a financial disaster, if someone has come up to you and said, "Hey, it's dead, man. It's done," I want to encourage you, do not be afraid. Only believe. Believe in the one who is capable of taking that seemingly dead circumstance and turning it all the way around, back into life again. And not just life, but life more abundantly. He said, "I have come to give life and life more abundantly." That's his word, that's his promise, that's who he is. That's what a touch from Jesus can do. It can not only bring the reemergence of life from death, but abundance in that life. And he permitted that no one follow him except Peter, James, John, and the brother of James. And then he came to the house of the ruler of the synagogue, and he saw a tumult of all of those who wept and wailed loudly. Sometimes you'll look at these situations that you may find yourself in, and everyone around you is grieving for you. And they're sitting there saying, "Oh man, this is horrible. I'm so sorry that you're having to deal with this." And even Jesus knew in that moment, this is not good. This is only going to do more damage to your faith in that moment, because once again, just like earlier, it doesn't matter. You got to cast aside the fear of man and what others will think, their perception, because obviously they're not walking in the fullness of faith that Jairus was when he came and fell at the knees of Jesus. And he said, "Please, you've got to do something. My daughter is dying. I believe if you just touch her, you can heal her." That faith is still there, but these people that surround his home are doing damage to that faith. They're allowing this circumstantial reality that, guess what, Jesus has authority over. But in this moment, they're looking at the natural circumstance of things and they're saying, "It's done, it's over. We might as well grieve. We might as well just begin to just try and mourn over the death of this girl." But in this moment, Jesus says no. He came in and he said to them, he said, "Why make this commotion and weep? For the child is not dead, but sleeping." I don't know about you, but in those moments, I would take Jesus' word over anyone else's. In that moment where they're sitting there moaning and weeping and lamenting over the loss, Jesus says, "She's not dead. She's just sleeping." I encourage you right now, when you cry out to Jesus and he comes in and he says, no, it's not dead, take his word. Cast aside, push aside all those other thoughts, all those other cries of other people saying that, "Oh, it's over." No, it's not. Jesus is there and he's saying, "There's still life in this moment." And they ridiculed him. But when they had put them all outside, and here's the key, you've got to take control over these thoughts, over these impressions, over these whispers, these doubts from other people, and you have to push them outside in that moment. He took the father and the mother of the child and those who were with him, and he entered the house where the child was laying. So he had pushed out everybody else except for those who had faith in this moment. And then he took the child by the hand and said to her, Talitha Kumi, which is translated, little girl, I say to you, arise. And immediately the girl arose and walked, for she was 12 years of age. And they were overcome with great amazement. Once again, we see the miraculous and the effect that it has, not only on the parents, but all the people that were in that room. And he commanded them strictly that no one should know it. And then he said something should be given to her to eat. So we see in this moment, not only did he bring life, he was like, feed her. Start to bring abundance back into this girl's life, for her health is returned to her. I want to encourage you this morning. No matter whether or not you find yourself in it. I know a lot of these stories seem rather extreme, and they were within the presence of Jesus, in person, in the flesh, in those moments. You may not be dealing with physical blindness. You may not be dealing with paralyzation. You may not be dealing with an issue or a flow of blood that has been in your life for 12 years. You may not be dealing with death in this moment, but I do want to encourage you that just like Jesus in the natural in those moments could do the healing, I believe that even those circumstances in the spiritual could be healed by the Spirit of Jesus, because even though you may not be dealing with physical blindness, you may be dealing with spiritual blindness. You look at the world around us and it's utter chaos. There's all these different opinions and moments where it's hard not to be confused. And so we search on the web to find the quickest source of news so that we can try and wrap our minds around the things that are taking place on this earth. But in that moment, we need to be desperate for an answer from the Almighty. We don't turn to CNN or ESPN or wherever. No, we get down on our knees and we consult the one who is the author and the finisher of our faith, the one who knows the beginning from the end, the one who sits up from his throne and is able to see everything taking place on the earth, and he's the one who allows all things good and bad to take place on this earth. He's the one with the answers, so why are we seeking them from other things? We see in Proverbs 2:3 it says, yes, if you cry out for discernment and lift up your voice for understanding, he will give it. It's in that moment that the wisdom of God comes in. So we've got to find ourselves of desperation, of saying, no, I don't need to hear any of this noise that's taking place around me, but rather I need to consult with the one who has all the answers. The paralytic, you may not be paralyzed physically, but you may be trapped and shackled by anxiety or depression. You may feel like the weight of the world is pressing down against you. You can't get up and walk out your normal duties of life. You just can't bear to go on anymore. You're lame spiritually in that moment. But we need friends that will go to the extreme to be able to bring us into the presence of Jesus. It's in those moments that we surround ourselves with like-minded believers who have strong faith. Even when our faith is pressed down and our circumstances overwhelm us, it's in that moment that we gather a few good friends and we lay hands on one another and we begin to have faith talks. We begin to pray about the things that God's word says we have access to. And it's in that moment that we can see have that weight lifted off of you. We begin to yoke ourselves together with Jesus, and we begin to find ourselves being able to walk through no matter what the circumstance or the situation or the depression or the anxiety, no matter what it is, we find ourselves being able to walk past it all. Maybe you're not bleeding out profusely in the natural, but maybe you've got an injury in your heart. Maybe you've got a hurt within yourself. Maybe you've been offended. And anytime you talk to somebody, guess what? You're bleeding out all over them. With the negativity, with the, well, you just don't know what they did to me, and I get it, man, it hurts, but why talk to other people about it? Why not go to the ultimate healer in that circumstance? The one who can bring forgiveness and healing into your life and take those shackles of that illness, that infirmity off of you so that you can no longer feel like you're off to the fringes and the outside, not able to participate with life because you just don't want to allow yourself to get hurt again. But you'll find freedom through Jesus and his Spirit and what he can do in that moment. Or maybe you've got something that's spiritually just dead in your life. Maybe your walk with the Lord maybe your business, maybe your finances, maybe a family member has walked away from God. Maybe you've got a prodigal child and you don't know anything about them. They might as well be dead. You don't know. But in that moment, Jesus can bring life and life everlasting back into that person. I'm a living testament of this. You can ask my mother right there. There was a moment where she had to cut me off because I was using her. I was manipulating her emotionally to continue in my pursuit after things that were not healthy for me. And sometimes you got to come to this place where you got to let go. You got to say enough's enough. But yet, she never stopped praying for me. Yet she got down on her knees in desperation, crying out to the only one who could help me in that circumstance, and that was Jesus Christ Almighty. And guess what? Not only did I come back from death, that was a death sentence, heroin addiction, meth addiction, things that should have warped my mind to a point where I shouldn't be able to comprehend any of the responsibilities or to be able to walk out anything in life, let alone have a family. Here I am walking, talking, preaching, walking upright before the Lord. I want to tell you today, no matter how dead things seem in your life, whether it's a business, whether it's a person, whether it's a circumstance, I can tell you the one that can bring everlasting life back into that situation. And his name is Jesus Christ. And if you get down on your knees and you cry out to him in desperation, you'll see him come in and do something that only he can do in that moment. So this morning, I want to encourage you. It's okay to be desperate if you're desperate for God. And the next time you find yourself in that place, maybe you're in it now where you're just like, nothing else will change. I'm stuck. I don't know what else to do. I know who can change it. I know who can heal you. I know who can come in and to be able to return the ashes for joy, the heaviness for being able to laugh once again and to be able to walk in joy and peace. His name is Jesus. So would you stand with me this morning? God, I thank you that you're with us always and forever. That you're only one cry away. That you're only one reaching out to be able to grab a hold of you, God, and that you said you would grab hold of us in that moment, Lord. I pray that whether we're in good circumstances, in good standing, or whether we are in all-out death and in the pits, God, I pray that in those moments we would find this welling up within us, this source of desperation, not of hopelessness, but rather a need for the hope that's in you, Jesus. I pray that you would comfort your people, no matter what they're walking through today, God, and that it would be done through a cry out to you, God. And I pray that we would find ourselves building an altar within our hearts, that we would lay down any cares of ourselves upon it, and that you would come in, and that you would bring life to those circumstances, Lord. I thank you that your word is true in an otherwise deceptive world. I thank you that your spirit is ever present. And Lord, today we just cry out for your spirit to come and touch us all. No matter where we're at, no matter what we're dealing with, God, whether it's good, bad, or ugly, we know that you are just able to bring peace and prosperity to all circumstances. And Lord, I pray a blessing over these people as they go out into this world today, Lord. I pray that your presence would come upon them, that your face would shine upon them, that they would find peace and prosperity wherever they went, Lord. That they would find the dead things in their lives raised back to life again, that they would find the battles overcome, and that you would bring them into victory through it, Lord. And most of all, I just pray for a newness, a closeness with you that they've never felt before today, God. And I pray all of this in your mighty name, Jesus. I love you all, and I thank you all for being here this morning. And I hope that this blesses you.